Thank you, sir. Mr. President, did Arizona go too far? Did Arizona go too far?
Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And as you know, it's all about states' rights. That'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason, and that will be taken care of, I think, very quickly.
What do you think about Florida?
Florida's probably...
Supreme Court just ruled on. This total ban on abortion that the Arizona Supreme Court just ruled on is out of line with where the people of this state are. The issue is less about banning abortion and more about saving babies. I agree with President Trump. This is such a personal and private issue. I chose life, but I'm not every woman. I want to make sure that every woman who finds herself pregnant has more choices so that she can make that choice that I made. I'll never forget the first time I got pregnant, taking that pregnancy test, looking down, and I was excited, but I'll be honest, I was afraid as well. I was nervous. I was anxious. It's natural for women to be nervous and anxious when they're pregnant. I never would ever assume that any woman had the same exact feelings I had or situation I had. We know that some women are economically in a horrible situation. They might be in an abusive relationship. They might be the victim of rape. I agree with President Trump. We must have exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of a mother. We as American people don't agree on everything all of the time. But if you look at where the population is on this, a full ban on abortion.
All right. Well, we almost got to replay that one spot. Like she's like, I want more babies alive, but we need to give women more options so that they choose the option.
You know what it
more
reminds me of?
choices
It's
so they
like,
can make the choice that I made.
it's like I didn't smoke crack, but I want crack to be there so you can make the choice that I made not to smoke crack. I mean, there's a little bit of validity to that.
But
The
she
choice
said
is not
something
a
more.
choice.
She was like, I want not only to be able to smoke crack, but if there's like PCP and heroin, like more choices other than crack, like ways you could just get high.
You know,
And
they
then you could
scripted
make my
that.
choice.
People should have
they
a right to
scripted
get
that.
high.
You know what Joe and I said is like, even though it made no sense to us, is it probably made sense to a lot of women. That's the freaky part. A lot of women were probably like, I know exactly what she means.
Yeah, and we found out. We should pull up that graph. The voting demographics. You can see what they're pivoting to. If you look at the demographics of married men, married women, single women, it's red across the board. Besides for a giant blue team on the single women, it's like 70% single women are on the Democrat side. So who do they have to appease to win? The Republicans lately. And I think that's where you're seeing this bend to these. Like they have the keys now. Roe v. Wade got overturned. And a lot of them are now scared, I think, to do what they say they were going to do.
Why are they scared?
Ultimately, my view is they need votes. And I think the Republican platform, it seems like the common advice to them is kind of just shut up about the abortion thing. Like it's not popular. Like just kind of a lot. Like if we had another article up there that said a lot of them are kind of wavering on their views on that and kind of retracting some of them. And it's like, all right, where are you actually? And then the question kind of this podcast for everyone that we're going to, try to, I wouldn't say like this. Yeah, this is not like a prescription, but just a question to ask yourself, like, can you be voting for, quote, Republicans that are essentially pro-choice?
So they're not pro-life. That's the whole point.
They claim to be pro-life, but they have all these exceptions in mind. And then, like, I think when you listen to Kari Lake here, even though she says it's just rape and incest that she wants to make, we shouldn't use the R word, by the way. YouTube will get mad. But she makes it pretty clear that she wants options for women that are in like economic problems or in bad relationships. And so I'm like, what do you actually mean?
Are you actually pro-life?
Yeah. Are you actually pro-life, Mrs. Follower of Christ, Kari Lake?
All right, David, hit us hard, man.
Well, I think Trump's right. I think that the issue is a state issue. So I think it Ron Paul would say that as well, that, this is, you handle murder issues at the state level and the local level.
Do you think he's right in that he thinks they went too far, though?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's just trying to play politics there. So, I mean, it's not, it's not, that's the problem when you go to politics to try to find solutions for things that are cultural issues. You can't expect DC, which specializes in ritual human sacrifice, actually, to make a really good shot on like stopping this type of form of sacrifice. So I'd say you're never pro-life. You haven't been pro-life until you actually follow, as much as possible, a ethic of nonviolence in politics. And the closest guy who ever did that was Ron Paul, and Thomas Massey is the best we have going for right now, who actually like votes and legislates in a way that is consistent with the life ethic. I don't buy any of these Republicans as being pro-life so long as they're for wars and regime change, chaos, proxy regime change. You want to talk about the babies who've been murdered in Gaza with our taxpayer dollars, and they're knowingly giving more, and they're giving more, and they're giving more, and they're giving more. They're doing that in Ukraine. They literally don't need that war to continue. Ukraine wanted to have peace with Russia. That's what Zelensky ran on. He actually ran on a campaign of normalizing relations with Russia. Just like all the candidates who typically are relatively non-interventionist are the ones that typically win and then they go to war. Remember, George W. Bush in 2000 ran on a humble foreign policy, stay out of entangling alliances, and then he took us to all these crazy wars. Obama was the peace candidate in 2008. He won on, hey, let's stop doing the Bush wars, and then he continued all the drone strikes and chaos around the Middle East. And then, even Trump, he didn't start a new war, but he certainly continued on some of the stuff going on a little bit. In 2016, he was probably the closest to a pro-life peace candidate that we've had elected in the presidential office, although he's certainly not a pro-life candidate from like my perspective. Politically, he's done more for the pro-life movement than any of those other people. And the fact that he took on an anti-war stance attached to a relatively pro-life position, I think makes him the most pro-life person who's been elected at that level, in decades. So I would say, you can't look at Kari Lake and Trump as moral arbiters about the pro-life position. And I would say there's a lot of room that, needs to be accounted for actually having a pro-life position. I don't think the public gives much credence to the Republican platform when it comes to being pro-life, when they are so eager to go to war. Okay. When you viscerally know someone's full of crap, when you literally cannot even be consistent with your own ethics as stated by just looking around at what you talk about the most. And what do Republicans talk about the most? But increasing military spending, sanctions. You know how many kids in Iran have died over the decades for sanctions that starve kids? Can't be pro-life if you want to starve kids because they happen to live in the wrong zip code and they have a government thugocracy that is not in compliance with your local government thugocracy. That's not pro-life. So that alone, the sanctions on Iran, which Trump has supported and continued, it's not a pro-life. It's not pro-life. It's not pro-life. And people will listen to you when you're actually consistent because now the truth has its own power. You are not telling the truth when you say you're pro-life and you are for putting people in rape cages that got high. I mean, you're not for rape. You know what a rape cage is? That's what prison is.
Grape cage.
Yeah, it's a rape cage because even if there's even if there's a 10% chance that you could be assaulted, that's a rape cage because you don't have the means to defend yourself.
Great. Get rid of the R. I don't want to get rid of your rolling, but don't say the R word.
Oh, they're not allowed to say that.
They're going to cut that out of our. Yeah.
Oh, they will. I didn't know. Yeah. I don't know anything about that.
I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for Mike.
I thought you were saying
Mike's the guy who helps.
People avoid the word because of YouTube.
Suicide. That must have been weird. Us going like this.
I thought you were saying more.
No. You can talk about
say it more if you want.
Rape or suicide.
But I think
blew a blind.
Yeah, suicide.
I think I think to rein in the conversation though, just from like, I kind of want to there's obviously war, geopolitics stuff that's going to be endless and forever. But I think Christians right now, it's kind of a unique time in history because we have a pro-life, pro-life is on the ballots. We have states with it outlawed. There is progress to be made. And so can Christians then, what's our responsibility in our candidate choices when that is on the ballot, while at the same time we're seeing candidates that are, quote, on our team, but not actually putting their money where their mouth is, I would say. Now that they're worried about votes.
I'm going to play Kathy Newman here. So what David is saying for the Christians, as far as I understand, is that they're compartmentalizing pro-life to babies inside of moms, when pro-life is really like, what are you doing on the battlefield? What are these people?
Pro-life is pro-life.
Pro-life, pro-life outside of just the baby. Secondly, the church is looking to the government to fix something that they need to be looking to the church to fix, right? You know, it's like you're going to keep being dependent on the government to fix things, and that's going to cause more problems because they're going to be the manufacturer of those problems, right? Kind of like that. And then Mike is saying, on the flip side, we actually have a chance to maybe sway things at this moment because it's on the ballot. So let's get together and try and put some force down, right? Is that what you're saying, Mike?
I don't have confidence in the Republicans to make any progress. It's more, I think we need to hold these politicians accountable that claim to be pro-life. And then I think there's a bit of a philosophy discussion to be had about, because I think a lot of Christians, like, well, first off, we have demographics on Christian voting or Christian opinions on abortion, and it's pretty bad. It's like 30 to 40% are totally fine.
Yeah,
with it being
David,
legal.
pull up that those stats on all the religions.
Yeah, we'll pull this up to
Thank you.
just show, like, to the Christian, nationalist point of view, like, you got people that want Christians to kind of take over government and legislate in morals to fix problems. And I kind of view it as we have a church problem where not even in our own house do we have people with the right morals and values.
So they scapegoat on the government. That's what David was saying. And then they still get their ritual pagan death ceremonies with wars.
Yeah.
So they outlaw, abortion, but they're still killing.
I'd probably
Iranian
try to zoom
children.
that in a bit. I bet this can be tough.
That's
to
a
see
good
on
point,
YouTube.
man. It's a good point.
Well, I think it comes down to like
Zoom it in a little bit. I know the audience can have a tough time seeing. They're going to have a tough time seeing regardless if they're on their phone. But to just give you some numbers here on, this is from Pew Research, American Views on Abortion by Religious Group. And so we got the atheists and universalists at the top, 80 to 90% there. And then the Jewish people are actually 83%. Interesting. Going down to average U.S. adults is 57. And then we get into like the Orthodox Christians at 53, Catholics 48, Baptists 47, down like Mormons 27, Assemblies of God 26, Church of Nazarene 27. Anyway, our own house has some problems. I kind of view it as, and so trying to legislate the problem away, I don't view as the solution. I think ultimately Christians need to start ultimately holding Christians accountable. And part of that is these Christian politicians. Like I view Kari Lake, she puts on her Twitter that she's a follower of Christ. Like, what is she doing? Basically saying that if women have more options, that they'll choose the best option or whatever she said.
People are crackheads.
Like, I don't know.
I'm all for freedom, but babies don't have voices. They can't be like, don't kill me.
Yeah.
Like if you want to go, and neither do the kids on Gaza Strip for that matter. They don't really have a voice either. But I think it comes down to like murder and like what is murder? And like we have a law system that protects people from being murdered, and that's aside from Christianity or whether you believe in God or not. It's like that's just wrong. Here you have like a baby that can't speak out against, can't fight for itself, nothing. What rights does it have? And for as far as being murdered, and I get what the rape, the grape, the incest, and the human life thing. I think that is like taking the morning after pill after you've been raped or something like that. Is that considered abortion? Like
No.
some of these things, they're kind of like semantic, but I think it is a little different when you're talking about a child, like a in the womb fetus. Can't say anything.
Well, I
make
think-
a difference.
Yeah, well, you're talking about a systemic problem with identifying humans and what is murder.
Yeah.
And that's like, and also giving a voice. I mean, the most noble and dignified, beautiful thing you can do is give a voice to the innocent.
So I mean, like, what happens if you allow babies to get, chopped, murdered, basically at like, 8 months, 7 months, 6. I mean, you just keep pushing it further and further. Like pretty soon, humans and lives it's just going to go to outside.
I heard
it's just going to go a little further. It's kind of like we accept, like you're talking about Gaza Strip. It's like things that we just disassociate.
Well, the problem
is disassociating from like what a life.
Let me bring up one thing.
Where it's going to go.
It'll be a quick little story attached to it. So it's like you're fighting for one person's freedom while alienating and murdering another, right? But it's always in this, it's like guys in this, like for freedom. So I heard this story from my wife. This is a true story. These gay guys commissioned a woman to carry their baby. I think it was like 6 months into the pregnancy, they found out this kid had like a proclivity towards some disease. And the woman wanted to keep the kid. But because there was a contract, she was obligated to have an abortion. And she could not keep that kid. And that was all
this in Canada?
California.
Might as well be.
Yeah, so those guys didn't want the kid because he was like deformed or diseased. And the freedoms of those guys came before that kid who was diseased, had no voice, and was innocent. And so like that's the systemic issues. You're fighting for freedom for people, but some people aren't people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like, who's a person? You know, the last discussion we had was, you know, a problem with personhood. We talked about that, you know, like who's your personhood in Christ and why is that such a big problem for us? And we are supposed to be the voice of the innocent and the people who can't talk, period. But the systemic issue, that's what Dave was kind of getting at, which I support, because I think we're scapegoating on church responsibilities, which is going to cause a cycle of us being unhappy with the government after, even if we do add pressure.
And to me, if you go look at the church denominations, can we look at that again? Let me show you something. So here's the problem, okay, is that these numbers, the way they're scaling up like this, they're flipped when it comes to something like the drug war, support for the drug war, support for these wars and sanctions against Iran and Gaza. All those numbers that are looking like that, they're going to flip, generally speaking. So these ones that are super good on the pro-life issue on the unborn, they're going to look super kill the kids when it's appropriate. And that's the problem. Because if you try to surgically go into a culture and say, I'm going to put a law on this, to stop this form of human sacrifice, but you haven't addressed all the other forms of the human sacrifice going on. And in fact, churches oftentimes, or people going to church are oftentimes leading the charge and continuing to a grotesque degree those types of sacrifice. You have not dealt with the cancer of the disease. You haven't dealt with the disease. You've gone in and surgically, it's like going into a tumor. So you got a tumor or something, and the doctor says, we're going to go in here and take out this piece of it, and we're not going to do anything else. And you say, well, you don't want to, and so you're asking me the question, wait a second, you don't want us to have a law where we go in and take a piece of the tumor out? And I'm like, why? I mean, look, I want laws there, but those are a Band-Aid to a problem that's much deeper, which is our cultural appetite for sacrificial violence. We have a cheapened view of life, period. And until you address that at the church level, they're not going to be a relevant voice in terms of talking about the pro-life issue, because the culture really thinks they're full of it. And in some sense, the left has a point when they say that they're scapegoating the woman, because if that's the only type that you'd stand up for life is when it's in the womb, then from their perspective, it looks like you're selectively targeting a group that you have some kind of Freudian, that from their perspective, some kind of Freudian hang up with sex. And so you're selectively, placing the heavy burden of state intervention on that form of coercion in a way which scapegoats and marginalizes women, and single women, particularly, who are the biggest on this issue, I guess. And therefore that doesn't speak to the truth and the beauty and the goodness of reality. So in order to speak to reality, you have to speak it with full truth, goodness, and beauty, all incorporated, which means you can't selectively target one part of the tumor, which says this is the baby part of our sacrificial appetite. Let's clip that off. And then really get really upset when they're fighting over with you. And you're like, if you came with the whole package, a lot of people would come along. A lot of people went along with Ron Paul. He had a lot of young people. He was in universities where they're filled with the biggest pro-abortion advocates. And he had 10,000 people pack stadiums because he was speaking a message of peace when it came to human life outside of the womb and in the womb. He was very pro-life. He believed it should be left to the states. He was an OBGYN doctor, so he actually knew what he was talking about. He delivered Selena, the singer, He delivered over 5,000 babies. He had stories of there's a story in the 1970s. A black man came into his hospital. His wife was pregnant. Nobody wanted to take care of her because it was back with segregation in the South. And Ron Paul took care of the baby and delivered the baby. It actually ended up being stillborn, but he took care of his wife and everything, didn't ask for a single dime. Okay, so he was truly pro-life. And guess what? When so-called pro-life Republicans had the chance, they couldn't stand the sight of Ron Paul when it came to supporting people like Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney and John McCain, who would ostensibly say they're for a federal abortion ban, but they didn't mean it. It was all just a gimmick. So I disagree with Trump and those guys to the extent that they attack the state election, the state bans. I think states should work these things out. It's not going to get you the results you want because we have a bigger cancerous tumor called addiction to human sacrifice and a cheapening of human life. And the abortion thing is just one manifestation of it. And the church will not be a voice that penetrates to the truth of this matter until it tells the full life story, period, and stops making exceptions and saying, well, it's not quite as scandalous when it's a kid that you drop a bomb on. How? And what universe, when you stand before God, is that going to be, well, what? How is that okay? I don't understand. Can anybody explain to me how that's not just
You're Nazi? You're Nazi.
How can you say that?
You think?
How can you say, Republicans say, and Southern Baptists and so forth, why are you going to say it's okay to go along with sanctions and bombs and killing people? That is so demonic. And to say that you're pro-life means you're not, and which means people will call your bluff on it, you know? And women emotionally are intuitive about these things and they know it. And that's why single women don't support the church's position on that. If the church took on a full whole life ethic, it would be so beautiful that they would actually move people towards them. Now, some would stay in their vicious hatred, like Bill Maher saying, I think it's murder and that's fine. They're going to have that. But a lot of people would actually be swayed over into a pro-life position if they actually had the truth of the Christian ethic of life actually presented in its fullness. You cannot selectively target it because you have a hang up about sex.
You got to present it like you said. I'm fully behind everything you just said, bro. It strikes the core.
And
you can't. We talked about Bible study, selective outrage with sin, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that selective outrage where it's like one that everybody knows, and they're going to pay special attention to it, and it kind of puts everything else on the bench.
I just find it so smug, personally, when you get people who know better, and they think they're righteous because they're so pro-life. I remember like a church lady or something. Oh, I'm going to go and support this, ban attack on. We're going to make sure we lock up these kids for getting high on marijuana. And then I'm also going to vote for this pro-life amendment. And I'm like, how is that the same ethic? What God do you want? God desires mercy, not sacrifice. Do not resist evil with violence. We're talking about a violence issue here. And what happens is it's a way of kind of like selectively targeting your rival in culture. And I think there's a lot of churchy people who do kind of have a mimetic rivalry.
Scapegoat too.
They have a kind of mimetic rivalry with like the heathen single woman and men crowd that are aborting. They're like, I actually think I'm just saying this. I actually think they have a kind of envy. Well, how do they get to be free? Why do they get to just sleep around? Why do they get to be like able to abort their kids? I had to go through the hardship. I had to go through. And so they have a good position, sometimes for the wrong motivations are mixed in with good motivations. And it's just not so cut and dry as I'm a good guy because I'm pro-life. Because I think a lot of times these people say that. And again, it's motivated more about being in opposition to their neighbor who they culturally are jealous of. And they're like, well, why do they get to live like that? That they're the cool kids. I don't want to be. So I'm going to get them back. I'm going to get you back. I'm going to get you back. Okay, what do you actually see? That's what Gerard says. When you fight so much because you want to be in rivalry with your neighbor, you lose sight of the object itself, right? And you get in such rivalry with one another. At first, we were fighting over that phone. I think that's mine. You're like, no, that's mine, dude. And I'm like, no, that's mine. And then the whole thing spills out into a rivalry that never stops. At some point, the phone fades away. Yeah. And now we're just obsessed with one-upping one another. And that's what's happening with the pro-life movement in its reaction to the left, is that it's forgotten what the point of it is, life and its sacredness. And so it's divorced it from all of the actual truth of life, which is that you don't have a right to use violence against people. You don't have a right to drop a bomb on somebody because of your theology or some stupid idea you got from some quack from 100 years ago who no one ever heard of for 2,000 years in the church.
Yeah.
Darby.
It's just not as fun, man.
Well,
It's
I
not
think
as fun.
I think
It's not as
Schofield.
fun.
I think there's like an element of, because we saw it with the gay marriage stuff too, is where Christians, and I think it's rightfully so, when something that is they view sinful or horrific like abortion is literally put in culture as something that's glorified, whether it be the LGBT stuff, you know, you got people celebrating their abortions, like you're gonna have a selective outrage on it. And I personally think that is warranted in those cases, because you don't have them, Christians marching about anything else. It's stuff that's usually like a sin issue. It's stuff that's specifically glorified in our culture as like, this is fine, this is great, we don't view it as bad. And I think there's a warrant for some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not good to go like, the drug war isn't productive or good, but it's also not good. Like, no one's glorifying drug use in the way that people are glorifying abortion, I would say.
I get what you're saying, Mike. It's like, are they glorifying? Like, there's a lot of pastors who are glorifying the war in Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip and people dying out there.
Yeah.
But it's I get what you're saying. I know
is that like
They call them Amalekites.
Amalekites, yeah.
how
murder and
common is that
kill.
though? Is that like Greg Locke and like two of his buddies?
It's actually, depending on how much is attached to it.
It's
Like,
not as glorious as it used to be, but it's still there. That spirit of like, they're Amalekites, wipe them all out, turn them into glass. They
I feel
say
like
that. That's still a thing.
well,
It's a boomer thing more, but it's still.
you think about like just they're saying pro-choice. That's what the focus is on, is giving someone a choice. And the idea is like that choice happens when you choose to bang that person.
Yeah, you're solving another sin.
That's what you're doing. But the choice is like it's like freedom. Like, I'm pro freedom. I want people to have choices. I think that's part of the way that the law should be. We should be able to make, because like you go down that rabbit hole and then you're living in like a tyrannical place where they tell you who
but you
can
don't
live
get
and who
choices on murdering.
can't. It is murder. At
Yeah,
some
so
point it is. Like,
right.
I
So
mean,
that's the libertarian kind of like Tommy Lahren. I remember her
and if you
trying
can
to say
take a
that.
piece of the tumor out, why not take a little bit of it out if you can, right? Like, that sounds like a good idea than having like the biggest tumor possible. I mean, we want to excise the whole thing, but like most people don't see these issues the way that you do, David.
But then they're not Christian.
They don't.
You have to imitate Christ. Imitate Christ means you have to defend your neighbor against the mob no matter what.
Well, I
and
think
if you can't put that together, that's a problem.
Well,
with your conscience.
David. So like, let's look at
That's
it.
a problem with your conscience.
Would
Wake
you-
up. We need to smoke out the fake.
Let's have a
white people.
let's do
have
it.
the
Let's
real
do
people
let's
stand
do a
up.
hypothetical here, okay? So we want to get the whole tumor, right? Everybody wants to get the whole tumor. I think what you're pointing at is that people don't understand there's a whole tumor. So if they were understanding there was a whole tumor, it's like, let's take out some of this and then get to that, right? But you're saying that most of the
They have an
Christians
idolatrous-
don't even know.
Yeah, it's so deeper than what I've even said, because they have an idolatrous
because if what-
relationship to the state. They
if
worship
what-
the state.
If
You
what
also
Joe
said-
was saying is right, because like, take for instance a believer, just for the sake, like take for instance, let's use Mike as an example. He believes war is bad. He believes that the unborn child and the kid who's dying in the Middle East is equally, like, he's not supporting any of these things. But he's like, let's take the small win with the abortion, get to the kid on the Gaza Strip. Like that would be a different frame of mind. It's like a 1%er in the church.
That's a very
So
rare
1%er.
person.
So I get that point. So if we can kind of, meet in the middle there, that's what we want, is to educate the people so they understand there's a bigger tumor.
Yeah.
But this is just a piece of it. But let's take that piece of
Is it that rare? I just think it's ridiculous.
I know it's rare. I know a lot of people in my experience, they don't view war as murder, or to kill a man as murder. Like, it's a tough conversation in church where they're like, hey, when can I exercise violence? Like, when is war okay for our country? Like, I know that's a hard conversation. Like, a lot of people, I know that
because our economy is built on war. That's why it's a very warmongering place.
So it's like
our little small towns and red states are all filled with little bases, and you've got every small town's got a jail and a prison that's making money off of assault every day of nonviolent people destroying families. We are so sick and twistedly addicted to violence, it's not even funny. And the church needs to wake up and look in the mirror and stop acting like a coward, face the reality that they are not imitating Christ. They're imitating Caesar, and you can't get results doing it that way. The lukewarm people get spewed out of the body of Christ, and it's time to have people rather be hot or cold. And I want some heat. It's time to have some life.
Well, there's a lot of things.
Life requires heat.
Like there's a concept of pagan instinct, right? Like the bloodlust, the need for propitiation, sending your sons out to war.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like a lust. It's like a desire,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people know that that's in them. When they accept Christ, there's a transformation where you accept him as a propitiation, but these concepts aren't meeting their point. So you have a very fractured understanding of like where the battlefront is. So they'll say like, yeah, we're fighting for abortion. That's life, bro. But they don't know that their sons are dying on the battlefield because of some, like you said, military industrial complex. It's
Mm-hmm.
like forcing their will upon you because they're so programmed. It's almost like they are Stockholm syndrome psychos, crackheads. And, they want to love Christ, but like, and I know that's our mission here, is to try and inject some kind of heat, like you were talking about. Are you going to be hot, or are you going to be cold? You're gonna tuck tail and run when the gravity of these things actually comes and hits you in the face.
Yeah.
Like, did John go to prison after he baptized?
I think a sane society should have laws protecting the unborn, obviously, just like murder, right? But we have so twisted our ethical framework that it's just, we're not going to have any real strong permanent solution in the legislative level or even on the state level. They can repeal every abortion ban you pass, and it just becomes an endless thing. And I think the bigger thing that needs to be focused on is do those things as a mechanism to have some state restrictions to stop that as much as possible, but understand that you're dealing with people who are very much okay with this type of sacrifice. They're okay with it. And they're not just okay with it. A lot of them are very driven by it, right? Because it hinges on the very notion of America's founding mythologies. That
1776, baby.
But it's a continuation of that. This the deification of the individual, or the deification of, now it's not as much as that. It's now become a coalition of victim, martyr groups, and women have situated their worldview as one of the victim martyr groups that, need to get vengeance on society for all of the past restrictions and abuses and oppressions. And they've made a coalition with other victim martyr groups, right? Like the LGBT and these little unionizations, like these little unions of people's identity. They all come together and they create a little coalition of victim martyr groups that want to get revenge. And the way, in my opinion, you have to deal with that is to reject the whole game itself and to tell the truth, and don't be partisan to the point where, you're saying, well, this type of pro-life is superior to this type of pro-life. No, life must be protected in all of its stages. And so take your wins when you can get them at the state. But here's the thing that bothers me. These people who want to criticize, most of the pro-life groups are not, I don't want to say that, but a lot of the people criticizing Trump for trying to, he did more for them than their pro-life industrial complex ever did. Their thing was a grift. And he's right. He said it as such. They were always fundraising about, one of these days we're going to get them. One of these days we're going to get them. And then he's like, well, we got it for you, done. Now you're whining and complaining. And he points to people like Lindsey Graham, who wants a federal abortion ban. Well, that's unconstitutional. So you're nihilistic. You're nihilistic to take a matter that is always dealt with at the state and local level, which is murder, and say, well, for politics reasons, I'm going to go ahead, take a shortcut and make a federal ban. That won't happen. And Lindsey Graham is not motivated by a desire to protect human life. Are you kidding me? You know how many millions of people are dead because of this guy and his policies, cheerleading for decades? So how can you look at, when I'm looking at Trump, who wants to stop the wars and actually did something and repealed Roe v. Wade, versus the Ted Cruzes and the Lindsey Grahams and all these fake little Republican Fox News types? I'm like, no, Trump's way, on your measure, he is way more pro-life. So even though he's playing politics, and I don't have to support that, you have nowhere to speak in judging the speck in his eye compared to the plank in these fake pro-lifers who did nothing for pro-life. Bush had the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and he had the White House, and they did nothing for pro-life.
That's my point with it all. Like, I
Yeah.
view most of the Republican I'm at the point where I almost don't want to vote just because I don't view
Anarchy.
Florida right now.
Churcharchy.
We have the full Florida's got full Senate, House at the
Yeah.
state level, right?
Yeah.
Why is it not banned
Oh.
completely? They did what, a 6-week ban, and it's like,
Let's just go
why didn't they go
Amish.
the Alabama route? Like,
Telling
what's
you.
wrong, DeSantis? Like, these people aren't really pro-life. They're just like, we just don't want it to be so far down the road like the Democrats want, which is basically up to birth. And it's like, well, you're the same thing. You're just
It's kind of like those midday TV shows where everybody's constantly going through a breakup and they never resolve.
yeah.
But you're
Well,
always
it's
like
just-
kind of weighing
yeah,
in
they're
on
the
it.
same side.
I feel like we
the
should
same.
just figure out anti-gravity and start a new Amish commune.
Yeah.
Because the Amish had it figured out, bro.
Well, and I think the core
do.
issue, like Dave is pointing out,
They don't
is
fly
the-
on plane. I mean, seriously.
Like
think about
these
it.
conversations,
It's kind of
wouldn't-
like a Chad move. Like, screw you guys. We're gonna make the best cabinets and saddles in the world, and you pay us a lot of money for it. And,
well, these conversations wouldn't be like
don't vax our kids.
needed to be had if the church was doing its job. Like, we're trying, I feel like, especially the Christian nationalist movement, it's like the church dropped the ball, so they're trying to course correct by going top down legislation on morals. And it's like, how about we fix the core issue, which is like at home in the church?
Well, that's the problem. Is like, the Catholics and the Orthodox, they have the most, I'd say, purchase on their congregants to say this is marriage. You're not going to be a part of our congregation if you get an abortion. Like and we're going to have some kind of cohesion among the churches so that they'd be able to effectively take back marriage. Because you're right, we abducted on our responsibility to manicure and take care of marriage as a sacred covenant. And we gave that. We offered it up like Abraham did Isaac, like a weird pagan thing to the state, to the government. And now they have it. And they're saying, we're going to kill your kid again.
And they did
Yeah.
it. And I think most of the modern licenses for marriage were started in a way to prevent interracial marriages, right? So the church took a position on that. Say, we're going to go to run the mommy government to get a license to stop interracial marriages. And then it bit them in the butt, right? Because then decades later, giving the state that power, and they start shaping the divorce courts and everything in the more insane nihilistic direction. And then they're like, oh yeah, now the state has the terms of the license. You've been adjusted to that normality.
Oh,
Well,
they're
how about
so
the state
adjusted.
defines it to same sex? And then it's like at that point, you're just fighting a rear guard position.
I
You've
think
already lost the
Christians
game. It should have been a private
Christians
affair
should have
all along.
boycotted state marriage at that point. It's like, we're
They
not
can't
signing
get
this
together. They're too
But
busy fighting over their own dumb
And it's
ass.
like, you
shit.
can't, if you run by like any average Christian today, the idea of not signing a state contract for marriage, it blows their mind.
Right.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is so.
And the
like,
problem is that the system, I believe the court system still defaults to like some kind of other thing if you don't get a marriage license now, right? Where you basically
like home, partnership
in
after
certain-
10
child
years.
support and all those different mechanisms that the state has created still apply, except for the alimony thing. If there's a breakup of a family that's outside of state license, right? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, it's more I believe it's more anti-male and anti-father when you're not in a marriage license, right? So
you're
so
gonna
there's-
on custody.
so you're like forced into this, fake, cheap ripoff of marriage, or you're punished more if you want to do it. If you're a godly person and you want to get out of that system, then
Doesn't that
their
make
state
sense?
laws
I know
will,
that.
will hit you even harder. So that's why there needs to be.
Irresponsible.
That's why I
for
say
not
we need
getting
to
the contract
emancipate
done.
the state. We need to emancipate marriage covenants from the state completely, and still have a public option for all the silly
Dave,
people
how
who wanna
long-
get a marriage
how-
license? That way they can have all that apply to them.
Dave, how long have you been sitting on that idea? Because we came across that idea in this room probably like 6 months ago, where we're like, that might be the first step in the direction this church is gaining that back. When did that begin for you?
I think Ron Paul was the first one in 2007
To start saying about
he didn't
churches?
explain it. I didn't put all the pieces together until I just started thinking about it myself, but he doesn't explain it that way. He just says, kept it really simple, just get the government out of marriage. And I was like, how would that solve the problem? But then I thought about it and I was like, well, you've got to allow people to, not just because people don't understand, it's not just the license itself, but it's also the whole system that comes along with that, right? Is that you might go to your church and they might say, no, we don't allow for no fault divorce. You need to have real serious, evidence of something really bad. It needs to be very, you can't just say I'm in love with a new person and I can destroy my children's life. There needs to be protection for children's rights in these covenants, right? And that's something that church institutions could have to sink or swim on. And we did start to see who's the really cowardly churches, like the COVID churches, who would basically create toothless covenants just like their government counterparts already do. And then you would see some have some guts, and they would start creating strong covenantal agreements that protect the children's rights first and foremost, and everybody else from there. And then over time, they would win at the end of the day, because strong, virtuous people would flock to those churches. They'd say, you know what? I don't care about the theology. I'm joining this church because they have solid, they should care about theology, but you see what I mean? People will be moving to a church.
Theology, though.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be moving to a church by the fruit that they bear rather than just quibbling over ideological wars about, predestination.
It's no fun.
You know
though.
what I mean? Then you get to the meat of you're like, I don't care, man. You know what? I was a 5-point Calvinist, but I'm just making an example. My local Presbyterian church isn't on board with godly structures for marriage covenants. So I'm going to go join with X church down the road because I fully agree with enough of their tenets and they accept me and my wife. And this is a way to protect our family and our children's interests. And I think over time, the marketplace, that word is so loaded because they think of it in a money way, but the marketplaces of churches would sort itself out. And I think strong families would flourish under that because they'd be safe and they'd be able to find each other. It'd be like a beacon. You would know if I go to this church, if you're a young person, see what I mean? If you're a young person, you're 16 or whatever, you go to this church, this is all a place where people who are serious about marriage and children congregate and hang out. So you can get into that culture.
Yeah, because love engenders truth.
Right.
And they're going to love that. And it's going to look like the most attractive thing they've ever seen.
So they might say, you know what? I used to go to the rock and roll smoke and mirrors church. That was fun. But they're on board with basically pushing everybody to the same garbage marriage system of the state. And I see the disaster all around me. I want to go to this church, which is a little bit less tickling of my ears and emotions. But I'm going to try this out because I really want to find a true, serious person that I can have a marriage with.
Do people really want that?
No. It's a small minority.
I think most people want lifelong love. They just don't believe it's possible or whatever.
Sense, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
They don't think it's possible because they think, again, they're emotional people. We're very emotional culture, emotionally driven people. And we think that, we're hysterical people.
I think what Joe is asking is, do they want the truth? And do they want to get rid of their little scapegoat playthings?
They like the smoke and mirrors and tickling into their ears.
Yeah, because it's a lot more fun. You're going to be.
Because I was thinking, could you, if you're judging a church today, because of our culture, it's almost like if the church has a lot of people, it's probably tickling their ears.
Yeah.
So it's probably the small ones that you're probably going to get the real.
I've always, I often think about that with media. When I think about talking about the truth here in media, I'm like, how do you get a critical mass following? Is that a sign that you've done something wrong?
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
No, I don't
Isn't that
think you
tricky?
can. It goes back into our conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think.
wonder-
Go ahead, Joe.
I wonder, I think it's what you just said. People want true love, but they don't believe it can happen for them.
Yeah, well, they're cynical about it. They're numbed out to the reality of it because, and people, again, they go into something like a marriage thinking that it's about their feelings and making them happy or whatever, and that's really not the point, right? And
Are we doing that with so we're doing that with love, and now we're doing that kind of with murder at the same time. What is it really with violence? What is it? What is life? Going more of a philosophical side, because I think that kind of bears down on the issue of validity. It's if you don't believe love is possible, and not for you anyways, and I've been there. Same with murder. Is it murder if it's someone else in Gaza Strip, or if it's a baby? It's what's going on there? Yeah. Why is that happening?
That's the same thing that the adulterous woman was dealing with the crowd, remember? and Jesus was going to stone, they were
Mhm.
going to stone the woman, and Jesus said, let he who is without this sin cast the first stone, right? And so when you're in that crowd, you don't take responsibility for the violence that's about to be done. This is on a micro scale, what's happening all around us when it comes to voting for wars, all that stuff. You've got a little stone in your hand that's going to go on the Gazan kid, and it's going to go on the Ukrainian and the Russian. It's going to go on all the things that you can just look at what your politician you want to vote for has supported and is promising to support. And you can see there's a stone on someone's head. There's a stone on someone's skull. There's a stone on. Now I have a choice to hire that person or rehire them. Can I put my name on them? Now, I think that really indicts the whole promise of voting most of the time anyways. I used to take a stronger stance about voting morally, and then after the COVID thing, and I saw most of the people literally trying to like murder people in cold blood all the time. Am I allowed to say murder? Or I got to say murder.
You say
And
murder.
then, screw these algorithms.
Murder's cool. No.
Can't even say murder anymore. What happened to this country? But that's how you know they're getting us, right? But that's what I'm trying to say is that, once you lose sight of that, you've lost the plot completely.
Well, there's an element of pragmatism too in it, isn't there? Like that we have to be realistic about. Like you're not going to get perfection out of anyone.
Well, I mean, it starts with education. I agree. And I think that that's what your point about having this discussion is today. Like, take a win when you can.
Yeah.
Take a win if you can. Might not win the battle at this point. But then you got this. I think what I'm hearing in this conversation is these are also opportunities, not just to take a piece of the tumor out, but also opportunities to teach our fellow brothers and sisters that murder is what it is. And that it's like an opportunity for education because they're gung-ho on something. They're already like biting at the bit to try and talk about murder on some level. So it's like, all right, let's have this conversation since you're queued up for it.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the fullness of this conversation and see how it cascades out to the systemic issue in the church. So we can talk about getting marriage back in the church, right? So that they can stop thinking about a vote on a ballot and start thinking about how do our churches start running marriage again, because that's really going to solve the problem. But it's an opportunity because people aren't going to want to hear about stuff unless they're interested in it.
Mhm.
And right now, people are interested in murdering babies. So let's try and use that interest and develop it. It's like Ian McGilchrist said, attention is a moral choice. So if we got somebody's attention, that's the first clue that we can use it.
Mhm.
But we have to use it to educate. It's like, all right, buddy, I'm going to make you pissed off for a second because the game you want to play is rigged and it sucks.
Well, just think too with this conversation, the conversation's a band-aid to the problem before it. Like the sexual revolution made our culture super promiscuous, and thus now we need this new tool, this horrible tool called abortion, to solve the problem of being promiscuous. And so it's like you can kill two birds with one stone by solving the first problem.
It's like Joe said. That's the problem. It's like Joe said. That's the problem of definition within love, murder. And this compartmentalization, hyperfixation on one outlet in the definition. Like, what is love? What is marriage? Love is not happiness. Love is defined in the Bible as truth and love. Love needs truth. God said he's truth and love. Those two run in parallel to define outcomes and directions. So I see they're trying to love the mother that, has a baby she doesn't want to have by giving her choice. But unless love works out for everybody, it's not love. It's just a preference. It's having a favorite.
And that's
not
short.
love.
It's short-term love for the mother because the damage it does to her for making that decision, I think, is, it's irreversible.
It's just like all the people out there who have bad dreams at night. They have bad dreams because bad things happened, and their subconscious, no matter how many excuses they make, it's still going to haunt them. They're going to wake up in a pool of sweat and go, man, that thank God put that law on people's hearts, and that is a little pressure point we can use. But I think love, obviously, it's the word that everybody loves the most perfect word in the world is love and truth. But people aren't going to know murder until they love everybody. Do you love your enemy? Do you love your neighbor? Well, if you do, you don't want to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter who he is or how he looks or where he is.
Yeah.
So that's a high calling. But I guess what I'd like to know, you guys, what do we do for the church, like the Protestant church? It seems like it's just fighting all the wrong battles, It's like Don Quixote. It's like the guy going after windmills. You know, he thinks it's like some big legion and he's just fighting a windmill. It's like kind of sad and pathetic. That's why that story exists, right? Is we're constantly fighting windmills. It's the truth, man.
Yeah.
Well, if
It's
you
the
have,
truth.
I kind of view it as if you have church setting the culture of society, church, majority of people being Christian, following Christian morals. You don't like the law is irrelevant. If abortion is completely legal, but you have a bunch of Christians, they're not going to do it just because they know their own morals. Like we don't need a law to say to not murder someone. We're not going to murder people.
Mhm.
And that should apply, I think, a lot across a lot of this stuff. And so I kind of just view like we need to live out Christ in the end. And I like Doug Wilson's kind of his advice is go represent Christ, go build a family, build the next generation that is living this way, because it's going to be a long uphill battle, and you got to do it at home in the family first.
God bless America. God bless America. I mean, who else is having these conversations? Like, I'm interested to know what the Russians are talking about. I mean, there's been so much with, I've been hearing from a friend that he said that Russia has this fundamental respect for things like marriage, say, you know. And he just started talking. I started paying attention to him. I was like, all right, explain this. Explain what you're talking about. He's like, well, gayness is not allowed on any level. Marriage is, still sort of somewhat sacred. And, started describing this. And then he said that Putin was a king. And I was like, all right, bro, you lost me. But I kind of paid attention a little bit, towards that. So I'm wondering what other kind of discussions are happening in the world. Do you guys know anything?
I don't know. I haven't. I think that the church has to do. Building families is a good thing, and taking care of your role model, making sure your role model is a good example, and pursuing excellence. And I think it ultimately comes down to you have to be able to, if you want the culture to change, you have to be able to meet the community the way Jesus did, which we were his body. We are his body on earth. And what did he do to get people's attention? He performed signs and wonders. You have to do signs and wonders. And I'm just really convinced that it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it's not going to have a lot of a lot of downsides as well as the upsides. But the public, you look at the way people act, and they don't believe in, when you go to church and you're not hearing, the full gospel, if you're getting a Gnostic ideology at best, and you hear that for generations and generations, it's going to create a very sickly church and a sickly culture. And you can't, if the church is supposed to be the role model, like the adult in the room for society to really want to aspire to be like. And if you're sick and weak and, not taking care of your church and it's weak, then people are not going to want to listen to the big brother. They're not going to listen to the adult in the room. And so you can't really sit in your really feebled state and say, let me tell you guys what's wrong. I'm going to come back now. I'm hulking up. I'm going to be a real strong church now because we still got some political power. Watch us now. It's like, no.
Well, that's what you see now with like the Christian nationalists. It's like this weird last, kind of pathetic rally that's going on. But they're like reaching too far, like way too far into the control. So I'm going to take my own bait on the Russian thing. Yeah. Since none of you guys did. But the Russian Orthodox Church, right? Something interesting to me about the Orthodox Church is that they are deeply woven into the culture. So you got like a Russian Orthodox, a Greek Orthodox, do the Armenians have an Orthodox? I know the Romanians have. I'm Romanian. They have an Orthodox church. And what I noticed in my study, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have like deep cultural connection with. That's why they're called the Greek Orthodox, or that's why they're called the Russian Orthodox. You know, so they identify strongly with the group of people that they're with. And I see that as like I don't even want to follow Turbo if you're listening. I'm not calling myself a Protestant anymore, but identifying in that means nothing. It means nothing. I mean, ultimately, what does a Protestant mean? Depends on who you ask. So a Russian Orthodox church, on the other hand, that means something. A Greek Orthodox church, on the other hand, that means something according to the culture. And so I feel like that might be a reason why, because obviously Russia came out of a horrible socialist systematic murdering regime, but they were able to, I mean, I've never been to Russia. I have no idea what being in Russia is like, but I do know that they still have certain things we're fighting for right now.
Yeah.
Like that's got to say something on some level to people. Like, what does that mean, bro, if they're not fighting about abortion over there? Or
They actually have done the most abortions per capita.
Is it legal though?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, if they're fighting about marriage or whatever,
They don't. Yeah, they're better on the LGBT stuff.
Okay. Well, take what you can get, bro. I'm
Yeah.
not. I mean, probably. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm just trying to spitball with you guys, see if you guys know anything. But that is something that I feel is interesting because you saw the Catholics try and make their church a political apparatus, you know, and it failed. So like there must be some middle ground where like the church.
I believe in
enjoys
politics in the
cult.
church, but it's just different type of politics. You know?
Right.
It's just this looks different, you know. So
Feels
it doesn't
different.
come from a legislative, you know. That's really kind of the rear guard. That's like the afterthought about what you should do politically. Like I don't mind that a little bit, but I think all the action is in the culture and it's in the world of art and it's in the world of science. So that's where I think all of our focus should be. And I want to have programs where people are talking about instead of I want to do the pro-life thing because it's important, but you know, I think if we did more programs at churches teaching Christian engineering and Christian nuclear technology and Christian chemistry.
You mean you don't want to sell like doTERRA oils? You don't think that's cool, bro?
Oh man,
It's not good enough for you.
Some essential oils.
Oh, I don't know.
MLMs in the church.
But you know, like if we
Well, speak to that.
yeah.
Like, what did the church do historically?
Yeah.
What was its
Isaac Newton was a Christian, you know, all
Galileo.
these great people were Christians. Galileo was a Christian. Francis Bacon was probably a Christian. You know, you had a lot of folks who, you know, Tesla was a Christian. His father was an Orthodox priest and his mother was very bright.
So it's kind of like the Signs and Wonders.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is that you've got to be able to, like, okay, let's roll back. Where did there's a lot of to it, but like where did this enthronement of nihilistic atheism start? And it started around the well, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but America had this growing love of scientism and the elevation of technocrats who could come together and create all these marvels and stuff through scientism. And I think that Christians
Stole people's hearts, right? It worked.
yeah, but Christians, they took a reactionary perspective, people who are religiously Christian, and they said, well, we're going to focus on the private domain of the soul. You guys focus on, you know, heart surgery and, you know, cures for cancer and creating energy and stuff. And we're going to be the guys that get your ethics cleaned up when you want to get right with God or whatever. And that is just not the point at all about Christianity. And see, when I say that, it's so alien to people because they can't imagine. No, when you repent and clean up your life and renew your mind and your actions, it's not that, you know, like God does not, the point of being a Christian in the Christian worldview is not that, you know, God really wants you to get so holy that when you sneeze, you say, I'm sorry, I offended you when I sneezed. But that's unfortunately the end result of the kind of holiness, pietism. That's not holiness. It's not real holiness.
Superficial piety.
Yeah.
It's like those
It's not even,
1960s movies.
I mean, it is superficial, but these people are really serious about it. But it just doesn't go anywhere because it's not Christianity. You know what I mean? It's a very, you know, what is called conservative, pious Christianity, unfortunately, sometimes is not it's not, it even is well-meaning in some level, but it's just not Christianity, because Christianity is an action thing, and Christianity is about once you're restored in the new Adam, you are in a better place than the first Adam. And the first Adam was not created by God so that when he sneezed in an offensive way, that he would say, "I'm so sorry, Eve. Just please forgive me. I'm
But it's also not like
it's just so sinful in the way I sneezed so audaciously next to you while you were eating a fruit."
it's not like Christians
it's
are
not the
becoming
point.
monks. It's not like Christians are becoming monks. So like, you know, I got a slew of engineer buddies. They're all Christian. Like I feel
Right.
like Christians are heavily involved in the
Right,
academics.
but guess why? It's because they have a Cartesian dualistic approach. The private space is that, and the superstars of private religion is are the theologians and the monks. So I can't be those. I'm a salesman. I'm a whatever, and I'm just going to compartmentalize my life and be a mediocre on the pious stuff. Can't measure up to the monk level. Can't measure up to the theologian level. But that's my Christian department of my life, and then the rest is this neutral space, wherein you ostensibly say I'm doing it for the glory of God, but you're not really thinking, you're not actually thinking the way Christ would think about what you're doing. You're just kind of like putting a little salt and pepper or a little garnish that looks, this is for Christ, but you're not. You're just chasing the rat race.
You know, Stephen Meyer, or Mayer,
Is
Stephen
that
Mayer,
the scientist?
God
Yeah,
hypothesis,
yeah.
signature in
yeah.
the cell, Darwin's
Yeah.
doubt. You know what I think is really apparent is the scientists that take their faith seriously, engineers, people who are glorifying God, seeing their endeavor as art, because art has something that it speaks that's more than just getting a job done, accomplishing a task. It's like something that has weight to it in like a pleasing way, like a gold ring has weight to it. He's in his book, he doesn't have to fight many theological battles. All he says is like, this is the way it is, how beautiful it is. Like, and I love looking at this stuff through the eyes of a saved man, through the eyes of a servant of Christ. And you can see that his renewed mind gives him those insights. Like he's actually using the keys of the kingdom, so to speak, to, give people freedom in their thinking. But I totally agree. The scientific materialism, like the Renaissance, gave way to where it's just like only for the secular people to hold that torch, and they're the torch bearers. Yeah. And we're sort of second-class citizens as we reside in the ethics and moral issues. And, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But like, look at Bach. He was arguably the best composer in history. Every single piece of work he made, he dedicated it to God. And each one of those pieces of work is a testimony to the brilliance of a man who worships God in his work. So I do think that needs to be, brought back in a sense that's more profound, where people are expecting that to happen, like with the anti-gravity, with the technology that's, I mean, you got to be kind of nihilistic to think that there's not technology that exists that make everybody's lives awesome. I mean, just like the story we were bringing up about Tesla talking to Carnegie or whoever, who's making all the wires, and Tesla's like, we're going to get rid of wires. Isn't this exciting? And he's like, no, wires suck and they fail and they break, and I sell wires. So I mean, there's people out there who want things to suck and live in the Stone Age, who are monetizing failure. But the Christian scientists out there, not the actual Christian scientists, but the men and women out there who love the Lord, if they would appreciate science as art, that glorifies God, I think it would open doors to the possibility. Because what's happening, I think, when I see the difference between like a Stephen Mayer or a Lawrence Krauss, is that Stephen's mind is opened up to art being, or science being art. So he can see that next dimension of beauty in it. So that's why he's like a better scientist. Whereas a lot of Christian scientists that are like mediocre scientists or engineers, they have taken the secular view of what's possible in the sciences. Yeah. And so that limits their creativity.
I'm trying to make money.
Well,
it's not. Yeah.
Maybe
they're trying to support their family.
It's just if you.
I mean, it's hard for me to even think of it that way. I mean, like or who's the guy who painted the Sistine Chapel? Like Michelangelo. Somebody came up to him and was like, "You're gonna paint this, bro. Here's your money." And he's like, "I'm gonna make this the most beautiful." Like, he had to choose to do that, and he had to have an image of what that was gonna be. Like, you have to think that shit through, bro. That's what happened. Yeah. So
there's a bigger question I was kind of having. It's because you're bringing up Russia and how some of these other nations are maybe not.
Which I, by the way, know nothing about.
As far, I actually have a couple Russian friends, so I get to
Okay.
hear about the war stuff from their point of view. But
What did I say?
It's a whole nother conversation. But because part of my theory is like where we're at now in America, is wealth, the wealth we built, does it inevitably lead to where we're at? And what I'm saying is, like, if you look at the countries that are not as wealthy as us, they're not so far down the path we are yet. But you see them starting to get there. Some of the more rich Middle East countries, they're getting more feminist. Russia is slowly bending on some things. Like, as they gain more wealth and comfort and more time for leisure, for people to go think of these ideas that they want to,
So I get it. You're saying, like,
protest.
if we make people's lives too good, we're just going to all be gay?
It's not necessarily that, but I think it's almost like an inevitability. Like, you have, as a society gains into the first world, I think all these ideas just permeate the society. Has it not like happened yet in any society?
Dostoevsky, he said, if you give everybody everything they want, they'll find ways to putrefy their
Seems
surroundings.
like
We're not talking about that.
No. I know you're not talking about that, but I see what.
Yeah,
Mike's
but we're not.
saying.
But we're not. It's not the same stuff. That's consuming desires and stuff. We're talking about you're serving your fellow human being.
Right. But as far
you're
as
serving your fellow human, and you're glorifying God by discover. What was the point of God saving us from our state that we were in with Adam? Ask that question or think about that question.
What was the point?
What was the point? Why did he do it?
connection with him,
Yeah.
For what
Closeness with
purpose?
God, intimacy,
For what?
I guess he wanted relationship with creation.
Why?
because he loves us,
Why?
because he's God,
What does he want to do it that way?
because he's God.
But what about God? Why does God want? What does God care about this planet for? You got to ask these questions. If you're a Christian, we got to think about these questions. What does he care about this planet? He made this to be his home.
He doesn't need a reason.
He does, but he actually says it in the Bible. He made it to be his home. This is his temple. He's going to dwell here. This is where he's going to be.
Because it's beautiful. It's truth. It's love.
That's what I'm saying, though. He made this to be his home. He wants to be here, and he's using us to help make it suitable for him.
No, I get that. Yeah.
That's what I'm pointing.
You
It's
have
not
make
just,
the
we don't have to
kingdom
say,
come.
oh, because he's God. No, he gave us a blueprint about what he wants us to do here with his salvation.
Yeah, like thy kingdom come, thy will be done. It's not only, hey, do this. It's
could
like
snap his
you
fingers,
are the
though, and make it how he
incarnation.
wants it.
That's
Make
not
it.
what he did for a reason.
Why? Now I'm going to ask you why.
That's because he wants us to do it. He wants
Why
us
does
to
he want
become
us to
like
do
us
that?
because he wants us to create because it's beautiful.
So he wants us to make heaven or hell over here.
I'm not what I'm trying. I'm not asking you questions that with the
No,
point of trying to get to the point where you don't know what the answer is. I'm trying to get you to think like, what is the point of saving us? It's not because he wants us to clean up our sins and that's it. It's to clean up is to open up so you can create. Okay. I don't understand why this is so alien for what Christians have been taught their purpose on life is. They believe their purpose on life is to get out of this mess of a planet and get on into heaven. That is not the point of Christianity.
Yeah, that's messed up. Yeah, no.
But that has everything to do with why this is so confusing and where to go. Because if you don't believe that, the point of salvation is to reorient your life so that you can look around and see where you can be in the image of Christ, in the image of God, creating with God, to create stories, to create art, to create beauty, in the little moments and in the big stuff. But the big stuff needs to be thought about just as importantly as the little moments. All of it needs to come back under Christ because Christ wants us to make this place beautiful. In Romans, it talks about how creation is waiting for the sons of God to be revealed so that creation can be set free from the bondage to decay. What does that have to do with you and your bad choices? You get what I'm saying? It has something to do with it, but it's not about me and Jesus or me or my church and Jesus. And it's all about this obsession with your personal sins. It is about this creation was created for him to dwell with us. And with Christ, we are now invited into relationship with the Trinity itself. And with that, we have the ability to co-create with God and to make this place more and more like him in beauty and love and self-giving. Now, with that established as our goal, how do we get there? You have to look at the pressure points by which, the reason why is it that all children and all kids around the world want to beat the dragon? Because that's part of what we want. We want to overcome evil. We want to overcome the tyrants, right? And ultimately, you learn that tyranny is a part of all of us. That's what, Jordan Peterson and people say that, right? But deeper, so what are the tyrants doing now? What are the dragons doing now? They've enslaved us to an energy system which is outdated in the way in which they distribute it. And that is the pressure point by which they get the entire public to heal and to submit to their toxic worldview that they imbue as a part of their leverage over our lives. If you have been restored in Christ, your job is not to just focus on being a good boy.
Yeah,
that's not the point at all. Actually,
you're saying, what are they using
to
you
be a good boy so you can be a great boy? You know what I mean? So you can do great things, right? It's the foundation for which you from which you can actually spring forward and do.
Well,
what
I
you're
like
supposed
that
to
because
do.
it's a high calling. That sounds like a high calling to me. I think that the bar is so low in calling these days where it's not like, and not everybody has to be Mozart or Beethoven or any of these, but you
we
have
need to
try
coordinate and
shoot
think,
for that,
just like we're coordinating and thinking about how to do a pro-life ballot measure. People should be coordinating and thinking how they can use their talents, because you may not be good at anti-gravity, but you may be good at branding, and you may not be good at branding, but you may be good at engineering, and you may not be good, but you're a tinkerer, like you said, or you're a doctor, or you have an idea, and you put all these things together and you start conspiring together to liberate people from the bondage to decay that creation is in. That's the goal. So that gives you unlimited things. We should be brainstorming all the time and not feeling like that's a separate extra curricular activity from your Christian life. No, that is what your Christian life is supposed to be. And it's so, I guess I'm a little just frustrated because it's like, man, I just wish people could understand how wonderful Christianity actually is. It's not this lame killjoy thing that people are embarrassed about. It's the most exciting, amazing journey to know that your creator of reality wants to interact with you and wants you to walk on water in various ways. He said, if you say to this mountain, move, it'll move. And he said, you will do greater things than me. And every tool he gives you, like, washing the feet of somebody who's beneath you in a hierarchy of leadership, like he does, everything that he models for you, turn the other cheek, those who live by the sword, die by the sword. All of those things are to be your action, like practice habits that help you actually do great things.
I agree.
It's not, those are the end points. Those are the means by which you achieve what you were supposed to be doing in the first place. Adam was not created so that he could wail on himself about how sinful he is. But that's what we thought, because that's how we act, because that's how we think of, like, what is the point of holiness? It's this kind of detachment from the world. Well, that's for the priest and the pastor and the monk to do. I'll do a little bit of that on Sunday and the weekdays and read my Bible or whatever, and then I'll just be in this neutral space. No, all things are under Christ. All things are good under Christ. He loves music. He loves what Beethoven was doing, has stood the test of time, and Bach and all these folks, because it's beautiful, and because God created the universe in a beautiful way. And when you reflect beauty, you are being a human being as you were intended to be.
I think the church,
so you should be excited at what
I
you
want
can do.
those. I want to see the dude. Like, I remember when I was 18, bro, I was all about it, man. And I had this feeling of like transcendence for the church, and it was like, it was awesome, bro. And I felt that, and I know that's true, but like, God's not going to bless us until we take back our basic stuff like marriage. It's like, you want to get to that point, bro, where the church is coordinated enough to where they say, hey, this guy's good with his engineering, let's get behind him. He's like our Bach or our Mozart on this. Let's coordinate with him. Like, they barely, it's just like, I want to see that happen too, brother. I know we're gonna be brick by brick laying heaven on earth. I know, but
we
all
can't
things
wait
too.
until we get to the.
No, we don't have to wait. I don't know,
Yeah.
bro. No, but it starts with guys getting taught some basic lessons about murder, about marriage,
right?
Because we have such the arithmetic down. Like, you're talking about the promises here.
Yeah.
You're talking about the beauty, and it needs to be encouraged, because we're content with, like, the grape factories.
But what did Tesla know that we don't know? He's not that we don't have to be a Tesla. That's the secret.
I don't think so, right?
We don't have to be we think Tesla is smarter than everybody. That's the problem with we're under a psyop. You see, even Tesla has become a psyop, a cautionary tale of don't try so hard because you have to be super genius like Tesla. And even if you are, the establishment will steal all your ideas and cut you out. We literally tell that to each other like a founding myth of why we can't get nothing done. And we do that every day when we talk about this inventor created a water-powered car and they whacked him at the Golden Corral or something. You hear about these little legends on the internet, this guy did this and it could power everything for 100 years. And
I remember doing that.
Those are folk tales, whether they're real or not. Some of them are based in real and some of them are not. They're just based to keep us stuck in the plantation of Satan. Yeah. Don't you dare run past the tree line because the master will come and catch you. And we're all screws. I heard a story about a slave that came before you. He ran past the tree line and he got completely, it's like, that's what we're doing, right? When we tell those stories. Oh, Tesla, you know what they did to him? And I'm not as smart as Tesla. So don't even try. Let's just hang out here and just talk about voting for Vivek or something in 2028. Like what is it? What a waste of time. I mean, there's so much opportunity. And I'm not talking about, you got to build anti-gravity. I throw that out there as a fun little thing.
No, you got to have.
There's all kinds of things. Like, how do we make housing affordable? How about Christians have conferences every year where they think about how to literally get the brightest, smartest people to come in and think about how to make housing more affordable so that an average family starting off can buy a house that's like, $20,000 in our dollars.
But they're not going to do that. They're
not
because they can't agree on marriage, which we already have a dead set rule for. Like we already have that black and white delineated in our book.
But they're still motivated by a desire to have a home. I think a lot of Christians would buy a home if they could figure out how to make it.
I totally agree with you. I'm just saying, like, that's why I was bringing up the Russians and certain weird things like that, because like if you could get to that point where some of these things
the Russians, we can learn from these people. They have things that we need to learn, and we have stuff they need to learn from us. And it's like there's just different things. They have a high abortion rate. They have one of the highest. They have a high divorce rate. They're recovering from a long 100-year waste of time with communism. So they're coming out of that, and they're trying to like orient themselves. They went through one of the worst periods of time in the 90s when their whole country, they wanted to be Christ-like in that way, where after the Cold War, they went to America and they said, hey, we want to do the capitalist stuff like you. And then they got screwed over. They literally got all these Wall Street freaks and psychopaths that we're still asking Wall Street to let their little puppets be lent to us to do things good for us. That's how ridiculous expecting anything good out of politicians is. The politician does not exist for you. Until Christians understand that, they won't understand what time it is. The politician is not there for you. He is there for the folks that put him in there. And I hate how everybody has known that to be true, but they still keep believing it's not. They can't fully wrap their head around. They are not for you. They are not for you. They're not going to do anything for your benefit. So get that out of your head. Don't even think about anything good coming out of that. And then start to orient your mind about what you can do with your talents. We need homes built. We need food that's clean, right? We need health. We need people working together to help each other, build each other up with different skills, build community.
We got a comment there. Christian scientists. How about Christian politicians?
No, that's the last thing we need. That's the after effect.
That's the after effect.
I hear you, Dave.
Politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from what? Art, from religion, those fundamental things that produce the culture, and then the culture produces the politics.
Yeah.
So all the conservatives have been psyoped into focusing all their energy on the politics, and they're missing all of this. This is where you start right here, and then you go through it that way. You can do stuff with that in the meantime for fun, but don't let that thing get you excited because it's not going to produce much of anything. You could throw in a Massey or a Ron Paul or a little Trump and have fun, and it's good. There's good things that can come out of that. You can have apocalyptic moments that are beautiful and good.
It'll be, just short-term wins that you're still heading in a certain direction, though.
Right. But we're not going to head in that the dark direction. We can actually, like in the world situation, I think we are actually moving in a better direction. We are better off today than we were in the 1500s, We're better off today than we were in 1,800, relatively speaking. There are things that we're worse on today, but when you add it all up, we're moving in a better direction. That means Jesus is winning. And the reason why people don't believe it yet is because we're not living like it. We live like a defeated people that don't believe that Christ is really king of the universe. And if he's king of the universe, we should be really curious. We should be, why does Jesus say, here's something to think about. Why does Jesus say that the kingdom is like little children? Do you know that if I have a panel right now, join us, sit in between each of these gaps, a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and we talk about, hey, how do we make anti-gravity? You know how excited they're going to be? They're not going to say, but we got to fix Washington first.
You got bills to pay.
No, wait a second. If I say, hey, why don't we have a device that allows us, how your dad likes gold? Yeah. What if we took trash and we heated it up in a microwave and put some magnetic fields and we could turn it into gold? Do you think we could try that? They'd be like, oh yeah, let's try it. That's awesome. If you told them, hey, wouldn't that be cool if we could figure out a way to take ocean water and we could put ocean water in our cars and find out a way to make energy out of it? Just go down to see that ocean? Yeah, that'd be so cool. And we could do something with it. See, with kids, their mind has not been corrupted by the psyop as long as ours has. So when you tell them the things that God designed us to do and dream and think about, they know automatically, wow, let's do it, because their hearts have not been as corrupted by the world, right? And so that's how we need to think. You need to have childlike wonder.
Yeah.
And that's this disposition that we have to have,
I like that, man. I agree. I think that's beautiful, David. And I think we should all be preoccupied with being like that child, and being pragmatic about what does it mean to obtain joy, spiritual joy and excitement in these things too. Not to see it as apple pie in the sky, but to do the diligence of also carrying your cross. That's what kids don't know that yet. They don't know what it means to deny yourself and carry your cross. So it's I like the way you talked about it. It's not a regression, it's a progress forward. And things are good and are getting better. Yeah. Those are the narratives that need to be spoken so that we can. And when I bring up marriage, I just see it as a starting point. How do you get coordinated? Families need to communicate. Families are parts of the church. If you have healthy families, they'll be able to communicate, and the church will be able to coordinate, and people like you will get more support for your ideas, and be able to support the people that can do cool stuff.
And the marriage thing is kind of sorting itself out organically because, Gen Z and millennials are just refusing to get married. And that may seem bad in the short term, but in the long term, it's them kind of boycotting the system because it's rigged fundamentally. So that's a good thing, right? They're not just rushing all into it and getting confused about what's going on there with our societal approach to it. So the fact that they're withdrawing from it is a sign of a healing process taking place. That's why you got to look at everything in a big picture way and realize that so many of these things that you look at in the moment, they look bad, but it's actually a sign that in 50 years or 100 years, you'll see where it's actually going. And you'll be like, oh, wow, that's why I had it course corrected and I shouldn't have reacted to this moment. And that same thing goes for the woke stuff. I think you should be very happy that the woke stuff's happening because it's a sign that our society is really wrestling with the Christ haunting of our world, that they're really wrestling with what Jesus said, which is that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Now that's him, right? But that has something that affects us in our society and the way we treat the marginalized and the scapegoats and the misfits. And that means that society is working through looking at its history, like looking at Oklahoma City bombing. Remember that horrible story and what happened to there, or looking at what happened to slavery with different events that were not told until recently. Was it the Tulsa massacre of the African American district that was the Wall Street of that area? People watch movies about that, and then we say, "Oh, that's leftist people that are trying to hate America." No, stop reacting. That's society. Even if it's getting things wrong in some of the details and going too far, it's actually working out salvation. It's actually starting to recognize, oh, wait a second. Everything in our history wasn't just this fairy tale myth. There's actually downsides to some of the things that our people did. Now you look at that, and the left wants to go the other way and say, okay, scapegoat and hate everything that was supposed to be good. The founders are all monsters now, right? But the Christian response is, no, we're sinners, right? And we have good and bad, right? And you want to have that kind of process take place if a society is healthy. So the fact that our society is starting to relitigate and look at past events and say, well, what's going on here? In the short term, it looks extreme because, yes, there is an element of that movement which is very nihilistic, that wants to burn things down with revenge. But if you don't react to it and feed it, you can actually use its awareness and like, hey, what's going on? You can use its hunger for justice and Aikido flip it back into a more glorious direction.
That's what John was saying with the abortion thing. So like you have that moral outrage against the babies being murdered. And then you take that into the full scope that you were presenting earlier on. Like, okay, well, are we really pro-life?
Right. Yeah.
Like, let's look at the full scope of it. So you're taking advantage of that pressure point.
Yeah.
And I like
that's
it.
That's a great thing to, instead of
Less
reacting
anxiety.
to it,
Less fear.
which we're seeing like at the Protestants and the Catholics and like all this, like just they're ganging up on each other over ideology and doctrine.
And people don't understand how Christ haunted we are. Like the whole frame of abortion debate is Christ on both sides. You know that, like the idea of protecting the woman from having to bear, the child of someone who, assaulted her. Think about how much we've come in history to the point where that is a sacred space of conversation. Whereas in much of human history, women would be assaulted when they would be conquered by a new people, and they didn't have a say in the matter officially in terms of raising the people who conquered them's new children, right? That is the reality of history. Thanks be to God that we have elevated human personhood on both sides of the gender, right? To the point where that is only what I'm trying to say is.
No, I see what you're saying. You're saying like, let's keep score. If we're going to keep score, let's do a good job at it. Like there's a win on this side.
Yeah. And I'm saying that it's only Christ that has elevated human personhood, male and female, to the point where both sides of the debate about abortion are Christ haunted forms of thinking.
Well,
do you see what I mean?
You gave me.
It's a Christ haunted thing to say. They're not saying like Bill Maher says, which is it's abortion is murder. Period. I don't have a problem with it. They can't say that. If they say that fully, they will fully lose. They can only win by hiding under a victim. In this case, the woman. So again, Christ said, the meek shall inherit the earth. What's more meek than a baby? What's more meek than a woman who's been harmed? And both sides are presenting two dueling victims, which shows you that Christ is haunting the terms of reality as we speak, even in its deviations, even in its heretical, like you're trying to justify killing a child. Wait a second, I can't. That's wrong. But your framework of reality is so Christ haunted, you can't escape it. You see what I mean? So being able to enter into that space instead of like reacting, you know what I'm saying? To deeply have solidarity with the other side on that sense of like, well, you're getting there because of Christ. Let's talk about that. Why do we take care of the woman? Why do we elevate her? Why do we want to hear her situation that she's been assaulted? Because all of history, we have been working through this process by which we elevate the human person, and it didn't look as well as it has been. Now we have to worry about something else. We got to elevate the baby, as we should have always been, but we haven't. In the old days, when they did abortion, it was like a child sacrifice ritual. It was like, okay, we have to do this. This is for the greater good of the gods. Now we don't do it. Now we say we're doing this because we're trying to stop this person from being marginalized. They see the woman who is unmarried and assaulted as a Christ. They see her on the cross of her situation, right? And they see the pro-life people as a cruel people who are saying, your fixation on controlling her, choices is got you to a point where you're putting her on the cross of having to, raise the child of a person who assaulted her. How dare you? Do you not know what you're doing? Are you sick in the head? That's their moral. That's what gives the pro-choice movement its moral power in society. It's the Christ terms that it borrows unconsciously. So we have to go into that and go into that space and kind of acknowledge what's up here. See what I mean? And say, okay,
Takes empathy.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm trying to get. Yeah, that's a great word. You know, we have to be able to get in there. If we really want to deal with this, instead of just papering it over with a law, we have to be able to enter into that space empathetically and say, look, I can't preach to you about life if I voted for Mitt Romney and all these people. I can't. I got to be the first to admit I am not pro-life. That's what pro-life people need to say. If they want to be the adults in the room, I want to hear people like that say that. I have not been the pro-life person. I have been supporting wicked wars. I've been saying turn the Middle East into a parking lot. How could I tell you to carry your child of a person who assaulted you when I can't even tolerate the living existence of millions of children in the Middle East because of my own ego?
Yeah, man.
How can I see? Now we've got now we have a Christian pro-life movement when the Christian pro-life leaders say that. But until they don't repent, what's going to happen?
Hypocrite.
The wars continue.
Yeah, because
Very
they're,
well
taking,
said,
rivalry
Dave.
continues.
Bravo,
they're
man.
taking on the accountability.
Bravo, brother.
When you say like they've got two victims, like you're juxtaposing them against each other, it's like they always present the this situation as an either or. Like it's either this victim or it's either this one.
Right.
And they both can't be, it can't be a both and. I think that's where like the empathy you were saying and us as being, because like when you talk so much about co-creating with God, you talk about like imagination, creativity, and like this idea of the powers that we have within seeing the unseen. So many times when I hear about scientists or even current doctors, Dr. McKee, he's a hematologist, but he's a doctor and he's very spiritual. And like a lot of our best scientists, artists, thinkers, in order to go into a world that is not, in order to go into the unseen, you have to believe and have the capability of seeing what's not here.
Yeah.
So you
have
have
to see around the corner, the
you
vision.
have to look into the metaphysical, the divine, like what is possible, like that imagination, that creativity, which that's like the ultimate periphery of beauty. Like that's where we see like beauty, because beauty it's beautiful, and we know what's beautiful, like a flower, like a beautiful landscape. It's gorgeous. And like even in the Renaissance, in the Dark Ages, we would paint. A lot of the paintings were very oddly done. Like if they would show like the Pope, for instance, a lot of them were based on religion. So the Pope would be maybe further back in the picture, and he'd be really big, and the peasants that were like closer would be very small. And it was to show status. So whoever was of the most status would be the biggest, right? And whoever was the smallest would be the least status, right? And then you go into the Renaissance, they actually started painting landscapes, which was really weird to a lot of people. You have to think back then, they're like, I see this every day. Why would you paint this? They didn't understand the point of like beauty of the landscape around them. The Pope wrote beautiful poem about just how gorgeous the landscape was and seeing God's beauty. And the idea of painting a landscape was very outlandish back then. It was like, why wouldn't the hell would you paint this? Like everyone walks on it every day. It's like, it's just normalized. And beauty is so important because like when we think about like what beauty is and co-creating with God and God being the most beautiful, and like the idea that we're ushering in this unseen metaphysical thing and turn it and bringing it to like a physical reality that we can all share in, right? This real concrete thing. That type of beauty I think is very inspiring for truth and for the way to like go into like these types of problems. It's not an either or. There is a solution that's elegant, that's beautiful to these types of problems. That's not just this binary, very mathematical, quantifiable. And if we look at those issues within that context of like beauty and creativity and like approaching solutions that way, which very good businessmen are awesome at that. If you look at like great businessmen, I just had a meeting with one of my mentors, and the dude he's probably made over $500 million in his lifespan, and he's almost 80 years old, and he's still doing business, and he loves business, and it's not about the money for him. He just likes solving problems, and he likes finding creative solutions to them. And he's always like finding elegant solutions that not only serve him, but everyone around him, which is beautiful. And it is beautiful because when you see it, you see harmony. You see this because beauty is like the working together of imagery. It's like geometric shapes, colors, and palettes that they speak to your soul. It's like you show it to anybody, like that is beautiful because it has purpose and it's designed to do something that maybe we don't even know we needed, but we need it now more than ever. And it's a solution. It's a miracle.
Mhm.
Just like we have, and that's what you were saying earlier on. Like we need to have more of those miracles going on.
Yeah.
And we're like playing around in the mud, like with each other,
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
fussing about in the turd pile.
Yeah.
You know what you made me think about? Like, I remember when I was a kid, I was seeing these pictures at one of Mom's friend's house, and they were like little cottages and like little sort of provincial villages. And like they were cities, they were like little mini cities, but they were so beautiful. And you like wanted to live in one of those little cottages by like the river because it just looked like the perfect place to live. You know, and I think that that is like the little pull you have, is even as a child, to see heaven on earth. You know, you look at ours and you see all this pollution and the loud noises and stuff, and it's not the same beauty that you see when you see like a divine beauty, like something that you can't hedonize. Like if you were to hedonize it, like you just feel so bad in your spirit.
Right.
Like you can't hedonize that beautiful village.
But what David
You
was saying
can't
was
go.
true too. It's like it's been demonized. To even
No,
talk
I
about,
agree.
like utopia or like the messianic complex or like the Tesla complex. Like the idea of just having
Hoping for something like that. is
yeah,
just
it's like, oh, you're gonna mess up. It's gonna become like a Brave New World, or it's
Well,
gonna become like a 1984.
well, they just crap on
like,
your idealism because they say that it's a you know sort of a delirium of
the
your
idea of like what conservative.
it's a delirium of your boyishness or your adolescence. You know, it's like you're gonna get over it, bro. But people paint those things because they know in their heart that it's coming. There will be a city that's perfect, that's beautiful, you know, and there will be technologies that you can't hedonize because they're just so beautiful. Like I like those thoughts a lot.
And technologies are extensions of our sense organs, our ears, our touch, our feet. That's what a car does. It allows you to extend your feet as organs to be able to go across. Your house is an extension of your skin, right? And your clothes are an extension of your skin. So all these things, we have to think about technology
I like that.
differently.
Exactly.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Technology is just an example of what God wanted us to do all along. Like he created us in this play box and he's like, go have fun, you know, like do beautiful things. And then we screwed it up. So he's like, okay, we're going to fix that. And then as we fix that and heal you from that, you're going to be able to do those beautiful things again. That's what I wanted you to do from the beginning. And then so many people are like, I'm just going to be focused on how I need to heal all the time. It's like, oh, that's therapeutic culture. That's not God. You know, God wants you to do things, you know, and he wants you to get out there and do beautiful things because you're going to be here a lot longer than you thought. You know, like earth is going to be renewed. Earth, Paul talks about earth as a seed. Our body is like a seed, like it dies and you plant it and then it comes out something better. And the earth in that sense is like a seed, and it's going to go through a process of dying and resurrection in some sense, a new heavens and new earth that I don't think looks like a cataclysmic, like it has to blow up.
Yeah,
I actually think it looks like kind of what we're going through now, where it's
beautiful.
Like there's pain, there's suffering, there's nihilism, and those who keep the faith, that means they trust
Endure.
that God won and that they don't have to be afraid of death. Because why do you not want to do something bold? Because you're afraid that it will alienate you, socially alienate you, take away your money, or strip you of your social currency, or maybe your family will reject you or something.
Well,
so
that might be a good thing.
That's all a fear of death, ultimately, right? And if Jesus defeated death, then you shouldn't be afraid of social death. If you really knew that tomorrow you're going to go to sleep and resurrect in the new heavens and new earth, just as much as you're pretty sure you're going to go to sleep tonight, wake up, and the sun will be there. Like if you really, truly believe that, you would act differently, and I would act differently. We would think differently. We would keep that in our mind, and it would give us such a bold joy that you wouldn't be fazed by these little things. Like if you truly believed it, and if you really knew.
You really? Yeah. No.
I don't. No. I doubt. I'm a human being. You know, I doubt, right? If I didn't, I'd probably do a lot. If I truly believed that way, I probably would do a lot of the things that I want to do faster and more amazingly than I do. But you hold back a little bit. You always second guess. Well, I don't know. Is that a responsible citizen thing to do? You know,
it's kind of like if you think about like, what is this? It's like you live as if you're going to die tomorrow, but as if you'll live 1,000 years. Yeah. It's like dial that in, bro. That's hard. It's hard. Yeah. But, you know, I thought that thought strike me, like when you're bringing up the left and the right and the pro-choice and the pro-life, is like, what did he mean when he said, I became like the Greek? Yeah. He didn't say I made the Greek a Jew. He didn't say I made the Greek a Christian either. Yeah. He said I became like the Greek to reach the Greek. And there's a certain beauty in, like, I think about the Orthodox Church again, like being Russian or being Romanian or being Greek. They all do things a little differently, but there's like a beauty in what they each bring that's a little different.
Yeah.
Like that's why God made so many of us, because we do things a little different. We say things a little different. We can I mean, who knows what things look like to all of us? You know, they're all a little different. And so I see that as like, that's why each little village is a little different too. You know, like each little thing that you do, if you have that mindset of like, I will die tomorrow, you're going to do it with like a little more like spiritual flair, a little more beauty is going to be inserted in this. Be less of that sort of monotony and like the dryness of dry bones. You know, you hear that, like the dry bones, like it just sounds so bad. It's just bones in the desert. It's like demoralized to the core. It's like, I feel like we are some dry bones in the West, you know, and want to see
like you were saying, Mike, like with the richness, and you were saying like your clothes are like a bit of your skin, and the cars like your legs. With all these, and I also think about the Tower of Babel, is because like with every advance, there is like a responsibility that comes along with it. And you're giving like more impoverished societies and how they have a different. Their problems are different than ours. You know, they call them first world problems. Like we're dealing with who's gay and who's not, what kid needs a sex change, and what a woman is, where they're just trying to eat, not get, you know, gang raped or whatever by whoever's there. So like with technology takes like a responsibility. Like, you know, like if you just ride around your car all day long, like you're not going to use your legs. Maybe you can have weak legs, you know, you're not going to be as, you know, cardiovascular might not be up to par. If you know, like there's just all, and that's the Tower of Babel kind of describes. Like here you have all this stuff, and then you lost the ability to communicate. You lost the whole point of like what it was for in the beginning. It's like us fighting over the phone, you know, and you forget why you're fighting over the phone, you know. And
it's kind of like those Christians
that
that
consciousness that needs to be there.
Yeah,
in
it's like,
respect to like what the purpose of it is.
Yes,
mission
purpose.
statement is.
Yes, like the purpose. Like, and I remember like when we went to California, like there's a lot of those people that were like, we need to look after renewables, you know, renewable energy, like seeing, like if you're going to live for just tomorrow, you're not going to be interested in renewables. But if you're interested in heaven on earth, you're going to be interested in something that, say, gives energy cleanly. Like you're going to be interested in something that is beautiful. Like the technology can't be hedonistic in what it is. You know, it can't be war. It can't be violence. It can't be a blood sport. It can't be Cain and Abel. You know, it has to be, and that's where, again, I see that, like, it's cool. It's because it's like, yeah, those Californians are crazy, but they also are, like you said, Christ haunted.
Yeah.
They want to see renewables. How can we connect with them on that point?
Because that's what I'm saying.
Because
Like
intrinsically, they want to see a heaven on earth.
So
let's
practice. Let's practice imagining. So that's where it starts. Imagining. So imagine that Christian conservative people that believe in gender differentiation in a healthy way and all those things, you know, imagine that they're very pro-life. Imagine that those are the types of guys and people that pop up and start creating, you know, low temperature nuclear energy that is, you know, powering ocean water, you know, using ocean water to power your cities that doesn't have high heat. So it's not like a Fukushima or anything like that. Low temperature nuclear energy that goes on. You can power your whole community with it. You don't need to fight wars over it. It's just endless, abundant energy. Imagine if that's the thing. Those are the people that bring that thing to the public. What does that do for the leftist people who have been told that people who are Christian are more likely, you know, churchgoers to be the ones who want to trash the planet and blow it up and just say, to heck with it. I don't care. I'm going off to heaven. That's what they have the image of. What if it's reversed completely? What if they see a whole new angle? And what if they see that same community produce the people who are steadfastly first to be anti-war? That's an area that I think we're winning on, where the conservatives and Republicans are finally starting to become somewhat anti-war, and it needs to happen a lot faster, but it's moving in the right direction. So think about that. What if leftist people and these people who are Christ haunted as we are, what if they saw people who are faithful, monogamous, Christian, you know, believe in gender differences, all those things that we're trying to struggle with them over? What if they saw us bring anti-gravity devices, much more cabin room than your current plane, you know, much cheaper much safer for the environment, much faster to get from LA to Florida in 10 minutes maybe. And it's beautiful and it's relaxing and it's floating and it's just floating and it's relaxing and it's safe. And who did this again? A guy that believes in Jesus Christ. What, are you kidding me? That's what the newspaper says, honey. Look. What? I thought those guys hate the planet. I thought those guys are oil people. What? Well, they liked oil. They just didn't want to ban it by violence because they're really Christian. That's why they're defending the kids in Gaza and Israel. Oh, wow. They have a coherent worldview that loves life. Wow. I mean, that's amazing. So imagine that's what's happening. Imagine, what does the state do then to say, no, stay with us. We're going to teach you our next chapter about gender undifferentiation. Why? You told us those guys hate us. You told us they hated the planet. You told us they hated women. They're defending the Gazan kids. You told us they hate the planet. They've got anti-gravity. They got energy too cheap to meter. You know how much more wealth we have now? But no, we need you to stay here. We got another war. We got a gender bender thing. Oh, I don't want your stuff anymore. You're toxic. You're evil. Wait, those are the words we taught you to say. Yeah, but you're the real one. And then if they're smarter and Christian, they'll say, wait, it wasn't them. It was us. We were the ones putting them in there. We were the ones worshiping these people, these politicians and these political bureaucrats. And it just withers away, organically. So that's the picture. You see it? It's beautiful,
I love
right?
that, man. I love that.
That's
really
it's
do.
probably a good note to end on.
I like that.
Good image to have.
Yeah, very.
Something to strive for. I think we're kind of
Love
caught up
that.
on the comments now. So
Yeah, do we have any comments?
no, I think we're good. I suppose one comment, they didn't know who you were. We never introduced you. We just kind of
David
assumed.
Gornoski, man.
So this is David Gornoski in
Y'all
the
need
house.
to check him out.
Neighbor's Choice.
And where can the people find you?
Just search my name, David Gornoski, and
Gornoski.
We're on all the various platforms.
A Neighbor's Choice as well. That's your brand?
Yeah, website is aneighborschoice.com. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Thank you.
Awesome.
that.
Well,
Love you
guys, we'll catch you next time.
Use your imagination, guys. Think
Yeah,
about it.
imagine.
Start using
Imagine.
it. Co-create.